Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise tonight to talk to our colleagues and through our colleagues to the American people about an issue that troubles me greatly. I've been in this institution 19 years, and during those 19 years I've been on the Armed Services Committee. Currently I'm the Vice Chairman of that committee and chair of the subcommittee that oversees the purchase of our weapons systems. In the past I've chaired the Research Subcommittee, I've chaired the Readiness Subcommittee, and I've spent every available hour of my time working to make sure that our military troops are properly protected and have the proper equipment and training. I am a strong supporter of our military. Whether it was in the last 2 years of the Reagan administration, the 4 years of the Bush administration, the 8 years of the Clinton administration, or the current administration of President George W. Bush, I've been a strong supporter of our military. I'm a strong supporter of President Bush, campaigned for him, and a strong supporter of Secretary Rumsfeld. I say all that, Mr. Speaker, because tonight I rise to express my absolute outrage and disgust with what's happening in our Defense Intelligence Agency. Mr. Speaker, back in 1999, when I was chair of the Defense Research Subcommittee, the Army was doing cutting-edge work on a new type of technology to allow us to understand and predict emerging transnational terrorist threats. That technology was being done at several locations, but was being led by our Special Forces Command. The work that they were doing was unprecedented, and because of what I saw there, I supported the development of a national capability of a collaborative center that the CIA would just not accept. In fact, on November the 4th of 1999, 2 years before 9/11, in a meeting in my office with the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the Deputy Director of the CIA, Deputy Director of the FBI, we presented a 9-page proposal to create a national collaborative center. When we finished the brief, the CIA said we didn't need that capability, and so before 9/11 we didn't have it. When President Bush came in after a year of research, he announced the formation of the Terrorism Threat Integration Center, exactly what I had proposed in '99. Today it is known as the NCTC, the National Counter-Terrorism Center. But, Mr. Speaker, what troubles me is not the fact that we didn't take those steps. What troubles me is that I now have learned in the last 4 months that one of the tasks that was being done in 1999 and 2000 was a top-secret program organized at the request of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, carried out by the General in charge of our Special Forces Command, a very elite unit focusing on information regarding al-Qaeda. It was a military planning effort to allow us to identify the key cells of al-Qaeda around the world and to give the military the capability to plan actions against those cells so they could not attack us as they did in 1993 at the Trade Center, at the Khobar Towers, with the USS Cole attack and the African embassy bombings. What I did not know, Mr. Speaker, up until June of this year was that that secret program called Able Danger actually identified the Brooklyn cell of al-Qaeda in January and February of 2000, over 1 year before 9/11 ever happened. In addition, I learned that not only did we identify the Brooklyn cell of al-Qaeda, but we identified Muhammad Atta as one of the members of that Brooklyn cell, along with 3 other terrorists who committed the leadership of the 9/11 attack. I've also learned, Mr. Speaker, that in September of 2000, again over 1 year before 9/11, that Able Danger team attempted on 3 separate occasions to provide information to the FBI about the Brooklyn cell of al-Qaeda. And on 3 separate occasions, they were denied by lawyers in the previous administration to transfer that information. Mr. Speaker, this past Sunday, on Meet the Press, Louis Freeh, FBI director at the time, was interviewed by Tim Russert. The first question to Louis Freeh was in regard to the FBI's ability to ferret out the terrorists. Louis Freeh's response, which can be obtained by anyone in this country as a part of the official record, was, well, Tim, we're now finding out that a top-secret program of the military called Able Danger actually identified the Brooklyn cell of al-Qaeda and Muhammad Atta over a year before 9/11. And what Louis Freeh said, Mr. Speaker, is that that kind of actionable data could have allowed us to prevent the hijackings that occurred on September the 11th. So now we know, Mr. Speaker, that military intelligence officers working in a program authorized by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the General in charge of Special Forces Command, identified Muhammad Atta and 3 terrorists a year before 9/11, tried to transfer that information to the FBI, were denied, and the FBI director has now said publicly if he'd have had that information, the FBI could have used it to perhaps prevent the hijackings that struck the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the plane that landed in Pennsylvania, and perhaps saved 3,000 lives and changed the course of world history. Mr. Speaker, I rise tonight because we've been trying to get the story out about Able Danger and what really happened. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, I have to rise tonight to tell you that as bad as this story is, and as bad as it is that the data wasn't transferred to the FBI, and as bad as it is that the 9/11 Commission totally ignored this entire story and referred to it as historically insignificant, even though it was authorized by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, even though Louis Freeh has now said it could have provided information to prevent the attack against us, the 9/11 Commission ignored it. Not because the commissioners ignored it, but because someone at the staff level on the 9/11 Commission staff decided for whatever reason that they did not want to pursue the Able Danger story. Mr. Speaker, in August and September, I met with the military officials involved with Able Danger, and one by one they've told their story. Until, Mr. Speaker, leaders in the Defense Intelligence Agency, including the Deputy Director, have decided they don't want the story told. I think because they perhaps are fearful of being embarrassed and humiliated. And so what direction have they taken, Mr. Speaker? They have gagged the military officers. They have prevented them from talking to any member of Congress. They have prevented them from talking to the media. And the Defense Intelligence Agency has begun a process to destroy the career and the life of Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer. Now, it might be easy for us to ignore this, Mr. Speaker. We all have busy careers and worry about re-elections every 2 years and worry about our own families and our jobs. But I can't do that in this case, and neither can this body, and neither can the other body. You see, Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer took an oath to defend our Constitution. He took the words duty, honor, country seriously and devoted 23 years of his life in the forward deployed intelligence operations of our military to protect America. During the time he served our country, he's received the Bronze Star, an award that doesn't come easily, for showing acts of courage, leadership, and bravery in the course of his activities. He's received public commendations from previous directors of the Defense Intelligence Agency, including General Patrick Hughes, including generals at Special Forces Command, and including Admiral Wilson of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He's received dozens of letters and commendations for his work. The laudatory comments that I reviewed in his files are unbelievable. But you see, Mr. Speaker, there's a problem. The deputy director of the Defense Intelligence Agency was in a meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer almost a year before 9/11, and Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer showed him a disc in his office about information about al-Qaeda and Muhammad Atta. And the deputy director of the Defense Intelligence Agency stopped the briefing and said, "You can't show me that. I don't want to see it. It might contain information I can't look at." Now, Tony Shaffer wasn't in the room alone, Mr. Speaker. There were other people, and we know their names, so we have witnesses. Now, the deputy director has denied that meeting and denied he was there and denied this particular story. But the fact is, he knows that we're going to pursue it. And so what has happened to Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer, Mr. Speaker? The Defense Intelligence Agency has lifted his security clearance. One day before he was to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee in uniform, they permanently removed his security clearance. And now our Defense Intelligence Agency has told Colonel Shaffer's lawyer that they plan to seek a permanent removal of his pay and his health care benefits for he and his 2 children. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer, like Commander Scott Philpott of the Navy, like J.D. Smith, and like a host of other Able Danger employees, has told the truth. Now, Mr. Speaker, I sat here in the 90s, and I sat here during the 9/11 investigation and watched a ridiculous situation develop with Sandy Berger, the National Security Advisor under President Clinton. He walked into the National Archives before he was to testify before the 9/11 Commission, looking through documents, took the documents out of the archives and stuffed them in the socks and the pants so that no one would see them as he left the National Archives. Now, that's a felony. Tampering with federal documents and removing classified information regarding our security and information that the 9/11 Commission needed to see. Sandy Berger initially lied about it, said he didn't do it, then he admitted it, and he was given a punishment, and oh, by the way, his security clearance was temporarily lifted. He'll get it back again. For lying, for stealing, and for committing an act of outrage against our country's security. Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer, a Bronze Star 23-year military veteran, simply told the truth. And now his life is being ruined. His career is ended. He's no longer in military intelligence. They've taken his security clearance, and they're about to destroy him as a person. They're about to deny him the basic health care and the salary that he's earned. And they're doing it in this way, and this is outrageous. It's evil. Because they don't want to fire Tony, because they also don't want him to talk to the media. And so by suspending him and removing his pay and his health care, they hurt him bad, but he can't talk because he's under suspension. And his lawyer has advised him that to talk to the media, to talk to members of Congress, even when he's not being paid, would cause him further problems and totally prevent him from ever having this gross problem reversed. Mr. Speaker, this is outrageous. Mr. Speaker, this is not America. Over my 19 years in Congress, I've led 40 delegations to the former Soviet Union. I've sat in the face of the Soviet communists and confronted them on full transparency. I sat at the table with President Lukashenko of Belarus, who's been called by our Secretary of State the last dictator in Europe. I took both delegations in North Korea, Mr. Speaker, and sat across the table from Kim Gae-gwan. And I told them that we abhor the way they treat their people, the way they lie about what's happening, the way that they distort information. Mr. Speaker, I took 3 delegations to Libya to meet with Gaddafi. and told him that we are absolutely outraged at what Libya did in helping complete the Lockerbie bombing and the bombing of the Berlin nightclub. You know, Mr. Speaker, I never thought I'd have to take the floor of this chamber and make the same statements about the Defense Intelligence Agency. As a supporter of the President, as a supporter of the military, Mr. Speaker, if we allow this to go forward, then we send a signal to every man and woman wearing a uniform that if you tell the truth, you'll be destroyed if a career bureaucrat above you doesn't like what you're saying. If you tell the truth, we'll take the health care benefits away from you kids. If you tell the truth, we'll ruin you. Mr. Speaker, this is not America. Mr. Speaker, this is not what I've been told by Secretary Rumsfeld that we're doing with our troops in protecting them and giving them the best equipment, the best training. This is not what I spend hours in committee hearings on. This sends the wrong signal to America's troops. It tells them, don't be honest. Don't respect the fact that you have to be truthful. If there's somebody that the truth offends, then you better be silent. Mr. Speaker, I have today asked for an independent investigation of the Defense Intelligence Agency and their efforts at destroying Tony Shaffer's life. This is outrageous, Mr. Speaker. They trumped up charges against him. They said while he was overseas in Afghanistan, forward deployed, that he forwarded cell phone calls from his official phone to his personal phone, and when they checked that out, it ran up a cost to the taxpayers of about $60. The second verbal charge they gave him was that he went to a course at the Army War College and he got reimbursed for his travel, his mileage and tolls, $100 and some. And they said he received a commendation for which he wasn't entitled, even though it was signed by his commanding officer and the acting Secretary of the Army. But they went beyond that, Mr. Speaker. They went beyond that with this man. They said he had $2,000 of debt, personal debt. Well, I'd like to have every Pentagon employee tomorrow, I'd like to have the senior leadership show us what debt they have in the Defense Intelligence Agency, so we can make that public. They even went to this length, Mr. Speaker. The Defense Intelligence Agency wrote in an official document that Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer stole public property. Serious charge. Well, when you check what that public property was, it was an assortment of pens, government pens. But what they didn't say in the Defense Intelligence report was that he took those pens when he was 15 years of age and was with his father when he was on assignment at one of our embassy outposts. And he took the pens to give to other students at the school when he was 15 years of age. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, it was Tony Shaffer himself who admitted to that thievery when he applied for a security clearance. So the Defense Intelligence Agency knew that during his entire career of 23 years. But they put that in the document against him. This is a scandal, Mr. Speaker. It's an outrage. It's a travesty. Everyone that worked with Tony Shaffer, the Navy officers, the private citizens, have all said the same thing. This is a scandal to get Tony Shaffer because he's told the truth. Now, this Defense Intelligence Agency and this deputy director had the audacity to have their legal counsel send Tony Shaffer's lawyer a letter on September the 23rd. I can't put that letter in the record because it's privileged information, but it'll eventually come out. But in that letter, in the second to the last paragraph, the legal counsel for the Defense Intelligence Agency says to Mr. Shaffer's lawyer, he cannot receive any more classified information from the Defense Intelligence Agency because I checked and his security clearances have all been removed. Therefore, he's not allowed to look at anything that is secret or confidential. That's a letter sent by the General Counsel of the DIA on September the 23rd of this year. 2 weeks later, Mr. Speaker, the stupidity of the Defense Intelligence Agency sends 7 packages to Mr. Shaffer's lawyer of his personal belongings, which the Deputy Director of the DIA told my staff didn't exist anymore 3 months ago. And in those 7 boxes, Mr. Speaker, were 5 classified memos. The Defense Intelligence Agency sent 5 classified memos to Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer, which they told him on September 23rd he was not allowed to have access to. Mr. Speaker, that's a felony. And I've asked the Inspector General and the legal officials to investigate and prosecute the Defense Intelligence officials who sent 5 classified documents through the mail or hand-delivered to Tony Shaffer. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the Defense Intelligence Agency, in its absolute total stupidity, included in those boxes $500 worth of federal property, including a multi-$100 GPS system owned by the federal government, which they sent to Tony Shaffer, I guess, to keep. They also sent, Mr. Speaker, 25 pens, brand new and marked on them, property of the U.S. government. The Defense Intelligence Agency, in its absolute, utter stupidity, sent Tony Shaffer federal property which they accused him of taking when he was 15 years of age. Mr. Speaker, there's something desperately wrong here. There is a bureaucracy in the Defense Intelligence Agency out of control. They want to destroy the reputation of a 23-year military officer, Bronze Star recipient, hero of our country, 2 kids, because people in defense intelligence are embarrassed of what's going to come out. And what's going to come out, Mr. Speaker? Well, we're going to find out, Mr. Speaker, that unit Able Danger not only identified Muhammad Atta before 9/11, not only did they try to pass that information to the FBI, not only was that large data destroyed in the summer of 2000, but now, Mr. Speaker, I can add a new dimension to this whole story. Because yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I met with another Able Danger official. I was not aware of this official's knowledge because he doesn't live in the Beltway. This official, Mr. Speaker, has impeccable credentials. I can't reveal his name today. I will to any member of this body, any of our colleagues that want to come to me, I'll tell you privately who this official is. And you will agree with me when I tell you his name. He has impeccable credentials. This official yesterday, Mr. Speaker, in a meeting in my office, told me he has never been talked to by the Pentagon. He's never been talked to by the Defense Intelligence Agency in their supposed investigation. He's never been talked to by the 9/11 Commission staff in their investigation. Yet this official had a leadership position in Able Danger. This official told me that there's a separate cache of information collected from over 20 federal agencies in '99 and 2000 and earlier on Able Danger that still may exist. Now, the Pentagon has told us all this material was destroyed. And now I have a senior official telling me there's a second pot of information that may well still exist. Furthermore, at the hearing over in the Senate Judiciary Committee, when Senator Specter asked why this data was destroyed, the witness who destroyed the data said, well, I was told that we couldn't keep this data for more than 90 days because it might involve information that contains U.S. persons, so we had to destroy it. Well, I found out that's not the story. The reason the data was destroyed, Mr. Speaker, was because Special Forces Command asked the Army for that data, and within a matter of days, that data was destroyed so the Army wouldn't pass it to Special Forces Command. But yet there still was, and I hope still is, a massive pot of data. But furthermore, That official now, Mr. Speaker, that I talked to yesterday will also say that there was no 90-day requirement, as was testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee. He said on a regular basis they kept information from Able Danger data mining for months and months and months. In fact, he will say that he had discussions with a lawyer in DOD named Shaffer, who told him, don't worry about it, just fill out a document, sign your name, you need it, put it in the box, and you can keep it as long as you want. Now, Mr. Speaker, that's entirely contradictory to what Defense Intelligence has been telling us, to what DOD's been telling us. Now we have someone who's willing to come forward and tell us that that 90-day period is not real, that they kept Able Danger information for months and months. Mr. Speaker, there's something desperately wrong here. You know, a sitting president of the United States resigned his position because he tried to cover up a third-rate burglary when some low-level operatives from the Republican committee to re-elect him broke into the Democrat committee headquarters in D.C. No one was killed. No money was stolen. No state secrets were revealed. It was a third-rate burglary. But it caused the resignation of President Richard Nixon. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about the deaths of 3,000 Americans. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about 2.5 terabytes of data about al-Qaeda. That's equal to 1/4 of all the printed material in the Library of Congress. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about Muhammad Atta and 3 of the terrorists that attacked us on 9/11. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about military intelligence officers, including an Annapolis graduate, who will command one of our destroyers in January of '06, who risked his entire career to state on the record, I will swear until I die that I saw Muhammad Atta's face every day starting in January of '00, a year and a half before 9/11. Mr. Speaker, this is not somebody off the street. This is a graduate of Annapolis, a 23-year naval officer who will command one of our destroyers in January, who has agreed with Lieutenant Shaffer. Mr. Speaker, we have 3 other people who have testified under oath that they saw the same photographs, and the person I met yesterday will testify that he had the name of Muhammad Atta before 9/11, but not the face. Mr. Speaker, this is not some third-rate burglary cover-up. This is not some Watergate incident. This is an attempt to prevent the American people from knowing the facts about how we could have prevented 9/11, and people are covering it up today. And they're ruining the career of a military officer to do it. And we can't let it stand. I don't care whether you're Democrat or Republican, you can't let a lieutenant colonel's career be ruined because of some bureaucrat in the Defense Intelligence Agency. If we let that happen, then no one that wears the uniform will ever feel protected, because we will have let them down. Anyone who wears the uniform of this country, who's serving today, expects us to back him or her up, and that's not happening. We're seeing lying, distortion. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, Wolf Blitzer on CNN told my staff that a Defense Department employee told him that Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer was having an affair with one of my employees. How low can we go, Mr. Speaker? How low can we go that allow this Defense Department to try to ruin the reputation and the personal life of a Lieutenant Colonel with a Bronze Star? To Wolf Blitzer, Mr. Speaker, we need to know the name of that defense official who told Wolf Blitzer, who told my staff, and he's not the only one. I have other media people who will come forward in this grand effort to destroy the reputation of a uniformed military officer, to create scandalous accusations. He doesn't even know my staff. To accuse him of stealing pens when he was 15. To take away his health care benefits for his 2 kids because he's telling the truth. What do we stand for, Mr. Speaker, if not the truth? Is it more important that we be politically correct? Is it more important that I not rock the boat because my party's in the White House, because I campaign for Bush, because I support Don Rumsfeld? Is that more important, Mr. Speaker, that I don't want to be here? I'll leave. I'll leave my post. But I'm not going to do it until we get justice for this man and for these people who the 9/11 Commission called historically insignificant. Mr. Speaker, there's something wrong inside the Beltway. Mr. Speaker, there's something desperately wrong when a military officer risks his life in Afghanistan time and again, embedded with our troops under an assumed name, with a false beard and a false identity, forward deployed with our troops, gets castigated, gets ridiculed, gets some lowlife scum at the Pentagon spreading malicious lies about this individual, and then say to his lawyer, we're going to take away his health care benefits. We're going to take away his salary. Mr. Speaker, if we allow this to stand as Democrats and Republicans, then none of us deserve to be here. When we all go overseas, we meet the troops, we tell them how proud we are of them. We provide funding for them. We give them training, we take care of their families. Now, what we are allowing to happen right now is a Defense Intelligence Agency to ruin the career and the life of a man who spent 23 years protecting his nation. Now, if Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer was telling this story alone in a vacuum, that might be one thing. But, Mr. Speaker, he's been corroborated over and over again. I've met with at least 10 people who fully corroborate what Tony Shaffer said. Those meetings with the FBI employee still works there. And she told the Senate Judiciary Committee, I set those meetings up with the FBI to transfer information about Al-Qaeda and Able Danger. So she's still there, Mr. Speaker, and she testified. What we have here, Mr. Speaker, I'm convinced of this now, is an aggressive attempt by CIA management to cover up their own shortcomings in not being able to do what the Able Danger team did. They identified Muhammad Atta, the Al-Qaeda cell of Brooklyn, 1 year before 9/11, but even more than that, Mr. Speaker. As the story unfolds, you're going to hear the story that they also identified the threat to the USS Cole 2 weeks before the attack, and 2 days before the attack, were screaming not to let the USS Cole come into the harbor at Yemen because they knew something was about to happen. Mr. Speaker, bad news never comes easy. But in a democracy, the bad news has to come out so we can make sure it doesn't happen again. This whole thing started, Mr. Speaker, not to embarrass anyone. This whole thing started because none of us knew that Muhammad Atta was identified before 9/11. It started, Mr. Speaker, because this Congress, this body in particular, tried to establish what is now in place back in '99, a National Collaborative Center. But the CIA said we didn't need it. The American people deserve to have the answers here, Mr. Speaker. They deserve to know why 3,000 people died. They deserve to know what we could have done and should have done to better prepare ourselves and to work to prepare for the next incident. The American people need to know where that multiple terabytes of data is. Is it still being used? We know, Mr. Speaker, that in January of '01, General Shelton was given a 3-hour briefing on Able Danger. So even if they destroyed the data back in the summer of 2000, in January of '01, there was enough material to give General Shelton, commander of the Joint Chiefs, a 3-hour briefing. Mr. Speaker, there's something here. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there's something desperately wrong, Mr. Speaker. There's something outrageous at work here. This is not a third-rate burglary of a political campaign headquarters. This involved what is right now the covering up of information that led to the deaths of 3,000 people, changed the course of history, led to the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, and has disrupted our country, our economy, and people's lives. Now, Mr. Speaker, we can ignore this. I can't. If it means I have to resign from this body, I will resign. I will not allow, after 19 years in this body, and as a Vice Chairman of the Armed Services Committee, bureaucrats in the Defense Intelligence Agency to concoct stories, to talk about the theft of pens when this lieutenant colonel was 15 years old, to talk about this man's personal debt of $2,000. I'd hate to even check the indebtedness of members of Congress. I know mine's more than $2,000. Mr. Speaker, this is not America. I had a group of college students down today, Mr. Speaker, from Drexel University. There were about 20 of them, including representative students from 8 other nations. And we talked about this. Of course, we've talked about all the problem countries in the world. We talk about our values as a nation, the need for a democracy, to have people involved, to have transparency, to have people who respect the rule of law and the Constitution. How do I tell them that that's what's working here, Mr. Speaker? When the Pentagon says that these people who simply want to tell the truth are not allowed, they're saying it's for classified purposes, yet the lawyer for DOD on the Senate side said there was nothing classified about any of the information. It's not about classified programs, Mr. Speaker. I'd be the last to want to see any information that would harm our security revealed. And I've seen many, many instances where I've been given sensitive information, in some cases, that only a few people in the Congress and the country had. And I would never reveal it. It's not about that. This is not about the DIA. It's not about the CIA. It's about CYA. It's about CYA by bureaucrats in the Defense Intelligence Agency and possibly some political operatives that don't want the facts to come out about Able Danger and the information that the Able Danger team put together. And in the process, they're going to destroy a man who has been recognized by his country, who has a family, and who simply wants to do the right thing. Mr. Speaker, I hated to take the floor tonight. I don't know what else to do. We've got committees of Congress working on this. I want to thank Frank Wolf, Chairman of the FBI Appropriation Oversight Committee. He's as outraged as I am. I want to thank Jim Sensenbrenner. The Judiciary Committee in the House is looking at this, hopefully going to do hearings. I want to thank Duncan Hunter. The Armed Services Committee has got a full-time staffer assigned to get to the facts of this. I want to thank Peter King at Homeland Security, following in Chris Cox's footsteps, because he's looking at this. I want to thank Pete Hoekstra on the Intelligence Committee. He's met with Tony Shaffer and offered to get more information. I want to thank my colleagues on the other side for standing up and beginning to ask questions. I want to thank people in the Senate like Arlen Specter and Joe Biden, who attended a Judiciary Committee hearing and expressed their outrage. I want to thank Jeff Sessions, who was there, and John Kyle was there, and Chuck Grassley, who was there, because they too said, in fact, Chuck Grassley called it a cover-up. I can't tell you the number of members, Mr. Speaker, who have come to me and said this is unacceptable. I would hope that as a result of what we've heard tonight, every member of Congress will ask for an inquiry. Cynthia McKinney from Georgia wrote a letter to the Chairman of the Armed Services Committee asking for an investigation. So we have them from Democrats to Republicans, left to the right, conservatives to liberals. Mr. Speaker, what's happening here is unacceptable. It's unimaginable. It's un-American. All over the world tonight, young Americans are wearing our uniforms. They're doing a great job. They make us all proud when we travel overseas. They make us proud because of the pride they have. And when you talk to them, they say, yeah, I'm glad to be doing what I'm doing. I'm doing the right thing for my country. I'll go any place the Commander-in-Chief sends me. Whether you're in Afghanistan or Iraq, they'll tell you that. Whether you're in Kosovo or Somalia, they'll tell you that. Whether you're at Hurricane Katrina, whether you're at Hurricane Andrew, or whether you're out in California at an earthquake or the Midwestern floods, our troops are all the same. They respect our country. They respect our Constitution. If we allow this travesty to continue, Mr. Speaker, then we've let all of those people down for some nameless, faceless bureaucrat who's fearful that the information will finally come to light, that the DIA just didn't get it. Back in 1999 and 2000, they didn't have a clue. They had millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, and couldn't do what a 20-member team did in being able to identify Muhammad Ali before the 9/11 attacks. DIA doesn't want that to come out, Mr. Speaker. They don't want that to come out. Heaven forbid the Defense Intelligence Agency, with hundreds of millions of dollars, would have a 20-member team do what they couldn't do because they were using new technology and new software. They don't want that to come out. That's why that deputy director, when he was at that meeting, said, I want to see this. Don't show it to me. And that's why today that deputy director is trying to ruin the career of Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer. The only way to resolve this, Mr. Speaker, is to have a full independent investigation by the Inspector General of the Pentagon. I've asked Secretary Rumsfeld today to do that. I would ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me in that request. Let the independent inspector for the Pentagon go in, not DIA. DIA can't investigate itself. It doesn't have the capability to do that. It doesn't have the integrity to do that. Let the Inspector General do the investigation. And while that's being done, protect Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer. He does not deserve to have his career ruined or destroyed for telling the truth. And while we're at it, Mr. Speaker, if DIA is going to continue to press this ridiculous set of facts, then as I said earlier, I want DIA prosecuted for the 5 felonies they committed in sending classified documents to a person that 2 weeks earlier they said was incapable of receiving classified information. And if this continues, I want DIA held responsible for illegally transferring $500 of public assets to a person that committed, that in the process of sending that stuff to him, DIA committed fraud against the taxpayers. I want them held accountable. DIA's stupidity, DIA's incompetence. We have a new nominee for the head of DIA, and I'm going to ask every senator to fully explore each of these issues before that person is confirmed. I will meet with every senator personally and go over all of this information. And I would encourage the senators and the House members to interview the other people who work with Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer and to get their assessments of what's going on here. They'll all tell you the same thing. Shaffer's being abused and used as a scapegoat. If they can ruin Shaffer, they can silence the story. It can't happen, Mr. Speaker. We can't let it. That's not what America's about. That's not what we say to our enlisted personnel when they sign up for duty. That's not what we say when we pass our defense bills every year. This man is being maligned, mistreated. He's being harassed. The most scurrilous accusations, totally unfounded, have been given to the American media, and I will name names, and I will ask for an investigation of the people who made those statements to those media people, because it all needs to be put on the record. And as someone tomorrow who will chair another hearing on our defense oversight to try to get the best value for the dollars for our military, I ask all of our colleagues, Mr. Speaker, on both sides of the aisle to join us. This is not about Republicans or Democrats. It's about what is fundamental to this country. And I would ask our constituents across America who we represent to join us, to express their outrage, to email, make phone calls, write letters to the Secretary of Defense, the President of the United States, to members of Congress, to simply let the story be told. Let the Abel Danger story finally come out to the American people. Let them understand what really happened. Let Scott Philpott talk. Let Tony Shaffer talk. Let the others who have been silenced have a chance to tell their story to Congress and openly to the American people. In the end, the country will be stronger. I yield back any remaining time.
Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Speaker, I now move the House adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. Tomorrow morning.